Imagine, if you will, the year 1888. In the heart of London's East End, a shadowy figure emerges from the fog. This is a time when the city is a study in contrasts. The grandeur of the Victorian era is at its peak, yet the East End tells a different story. Here, the streets are teeming with poverty and vice. Crime is rampant, and an air of unease hangs heavy, a palpable fear that clings to the cobblestones and seeps into every darkened alleyway. Into this world steps a figure who would become synonymous with terror, a phantom who strikes without warning, leaving chaos and confusion in his wake. He emerges from the shadows, exploits the fears of the populace, and then disappears just as quickly. In this environment, ripe with fear and uncertainty, the legend of Jack the Ripper was born. It began in the late summer of 1888 with a series of gruesome murders that shocked the world. The Whitechapel district of London's East End became the stage for a macabre spectacle that still captivates imaginations over a century later. In the quiet pre-dawn hours, the city's underbelly was roused by a brutal series of slayings. The victims, all women, were mostly those forced into the oldest profession by the harsh realities of Victorian life. These women, forgotten by society, found themselves at the center of a horrifying spectacle. The brutality of the murders was shocking, even in an era when life was cheap and violent death was not uncommon. The victims were not just killed, they were mutilated in ways that suggested a knowledge of human anatomy and a deep-seated rage against the female form. The killer seemed to revel in the violence, escalating in savagery with each new victim. Yet, for all the blood spilled on the cobblestones of Whitechapel, the killer left behind little in the way of evidence. The police of the day were ill-equipped to deal with such a case. Forensics was in its infancy, and the concept of a serial killer was virtually unknown. The lack of evidence only served to fuel the mystery and the fear. The public, already on edge from the gruesome headlines, began to speculate wildly about the identity of the murderer. Was he a butcher, a doctor, a member of the upper classes slumming in the East End for his own sadistic pleasure? The speculation ran rampant, but the killer remained elusive. As the weeks turned into months and the body count rose, a name began to circulate in hushed whispers and lurid newspaper headlines. Jack the Ripper, the moniker as chilling as the murders themselves, seemed to capture the public's imagination and fear in equal measure. These murders, so brutal and inexplicable, would come to define the legend of Jack the Ripper. A legend born out of violence and fear, a name written in blood on the grimy streets of Whitechapel. In the midst of this reign of terror, letters began to arrive, supposedly from the killer himself. These letters, scribed with a chilling bravado, were sent to the police and newspapers, stoking the flames of fear and fascination that surrounded the Whitechapel murderer, or, as he would come to be known, Jack the Ripper. Two letters in particular captured the public's imagination. The first, known as the Dear Boss letter, was received by the Central News Agency in September of 1888. The author, claiming to be the murderer, mocked the police for their inability to catch him and chillingly promised more gruesome murders. The second noteworthy letter, gruesomely titled the From Hell letter, was received by George Lusk, the head of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. Accompanied by half a preserved human kidney, the letter's author claimed to have eaten the other half, a macabre detail that matched the mutilation of one of the Ripper's victims. Yet the authenticity of these letters remains a point of contention among scholars and enthusiasts. Some argue they were nothing more than cruel hoaxes, while others believe they provide genuine insight into the mind of the killer. These letters, whether genuine or not, only serve to deepen the mystery of Jack the Ripper. And so the spectre of the Ripper continues to loom large over the annals of crime history, his identity shrouded in a fog as thick and impenetrable as a Victorian London night. With the city in panic, the authorities launched a massive manhunt, but Jack the Ripper remained elusive. In the late 19th century, the science of criminology was in its infancy. The police had no fingerprint technology, no DNA testing, and no surveillance cameras. The tools we take for granted today were simply not available. The investigation was hampered from the start by these technological constraints, making the job of the detectives all the more challenging. The public pressure on the police was immense. The gruesome nature of the crimes, coupled with the mystery surrounding the identity of the murderer, created a climate of fear and speculation. The press was relentless, the public was terrified, and the police were under enormous strain to solve the case. There was no shortage of suspects. The police considered everyone from butchers and doctors to sailors and lunatics. Some were questioned and released, others were kept under surveillance, but none could be definitively linked to the crimes. The most infamous suspects included the likes of Montague John Druitt, a barrister and teacher with a reported interest in surgery and anatomy, and Aaron Kosminski, a Polish barber with a history of mental illness. Theories abounded, suspects were scrutinized, but the truth remained elusive. The police force was spread thin, the investigators were exhausted, and the trail was growing cold. The murders stopped as abruptly as they had begun, leaving behind a chilling silence. The investigation continued for years, with detectives tirelessly chasing leads, analyzing evidence, and questioning suspects, but to no avail. The case of Jack the Ripper became one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries in history. It was a case that baffled the best minds of the Victorian era. A case that remains unsolved to this day. It was a case that, despite the passage of over a century, continues to captivate and confound us. Despite their best efforts, the authorities were never able to catch Jack the Ripper. Over a century later, the identity of Jack the Ripper remains a mystery. But that hasn't stopped people from speculating. Theories about this elusive figure are as numerous as they are diverse. Some of them are steeped in fact, while others veer into the realm of fantasy, each one painting a different picture of the man behind the moniker. One of the most popular theories is the royal conspiracy. This theory, which emerged in the late 20th century, suggests that Jack the Ripper was none other than a member of the British royal family. It's a tantalizing idea, one that captures our collective fascination with power and corruption. Could a prince, a man born into privilege and affluence, have been capable of such heinous acts? The royal conspiracy theory posits that he could, and that these gruesome murders were part of a larger plot to cover up a scandalous royal affair. But the theories don't stop there. Another widely discussed hypothesis is that Jack the Ripper was a doctor or a surgeon. This theory is rooted in the nature of the killings themselves. The victims were not just murdered, they were mutilated with a level of precision that suggested a certain medical knowledge. This theory suggests that the Ripper was someone familiar with the human anatomy, someone who could navigate the labyrinth of the human body with ease. Some theorists have even gone as far as to name specific doctors who were practicing in London at the time. Of course, these theories are just the tip of the iceberg. There are countless others, some suggesting Jack the Ripper was a woman, others that he was a butcher or a sailor. Each theory brings with it a new set of questions, a new set of possibilities, and each one deepens the mystery of Jack the Ripper. The truth is, we may never know who Jack the Ripper was. His identity, like the foggy streets of Victorian London, is shrouded in mystery. But that uncertainty is part of what makes his story so compelling. It's a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the heart of a city, a spectre from the past that continues to haunt us. We may never have the answers we seek, but the search itself, the quest to uncover the truth, is a journey worth taking. While we may never know for sure who Jack the Ripper was, his legend continues to captivate us, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the heart of a city. Jack the Ripper's reign of terror was brief, but his legacy has endured for over a century. The story of this faceless phantom has seeped into every facet of our culture, from literature and film to music and even video games. His name alone conjures images of foggy London streets, top hats, and the grim spectre of the unknown. Jack the Ripper has become more than just a murderer. He's a symbol of the underbelly of the Victorian era, a stark contrast to the polished veneer of progress and propriety that characterized the period. His crimes underscored the stark realities of urban poverty, class divide, and the dangers women faced in a society that left them vulnerable. His story, shrouded in mystery, has sparked countless investigations, each hoping to finally unveil the man behind the moniker. Yet the Ripper's identity remains elusive, adding to his mythic status. Even now, over a century later, the shadow of Jack the Ripper looms large, a testament to our enduring fascination with the macabre and the unexplained.